They say every old house has a secret, but I didn't find mine in a hidden room or a locked chest. I found it under a heavy, rotting tarp in the corner of the basement. I'd just moved in, a fixer-upper, the realtor called it. It felt more like a burial ground for forgotten things. When I pulled the tarp away, the dust was so thick it felt like I was breathing in the past. It was an antique mirror, nearly 7 feet tall, with a frame of black and silver carved into the shapes of weeping willow branches. I wiped a circle clear on the glass, expecting to see my own tired face, covered in drywall dust. Instead, I saw a world that hadn't existed for 50 years. In the reflection, the basement wasn't a damp, unfinished tomb. The stone walls were freshly painted a warm cream. The floor was covered in clean, checkered linoleum. There was a bright red tricycle sitting in the corner where my rusted furnace now stood. The light in the mirror was golden and inviting, cast by a lamp that didn't exist in my world. I looked at the glass, then looked over my shoulder at the cold, dark reality of my basement. Back and forth, the mirror wasn't reflecting the room. It was reflecting a memory. I became obsessed. Every night after the contractors left and the sun dipped below the tree line, I'd head downstairs. I told myself it was curiosity. I told myself I was just fascinated by the history of the house. But deep down, it was the silence of the reflection that drew me in. It was a perfect frozen slice of 1974. But on the 4th night, the reflection changed. The tricycle was gone. In its place was a heavy wooden chair, knocked over on its side. The golden light had turned a sickly, bruised purple, and there, in the doorway of the reflected basement, the same doorway I had just walked through, was a shadow. It was just a silhouette at first, a tall, thin shape that didn't quite fit the proportions of a human being. I stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was a trick of the low light. When I opened them, the figure had moved. It was no longer in the doorway. It was 3 feet closer, standing by the reflected furnace. It didn't walk.
It didn't glide. It only moved when I couldn't see it.
I tested it. I stood perfectly still, staring at the figure. It stayed motionless. Its head was tilted at an impossible angle, as if it were listening to something deep inside the walls. My eyes began to sting. I didn't want to blink. I knew, with a primal certainty, that blinking was an invitation. My eyelids grew heavy. Just a fraction of a second. That's all a blink takes. Snap. The figure was halfway across the reflected room. It was closer now, and I could see the details. It wore a tattered wool suit, the fabric slick with something dark. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, pale surface, like a thumbprint pressed into clay. I scrambled back, my milk crate clattering across the concrete. I ran for the stairs, not stopping until I had locked the basement door and pushed a heavy dresser in front of it.
I stayed awake all night, listening for the sound of glass shattering. But the house was silent. I tried to leave. I packed a bag, but the front door wouldn't budge. The windows were sealed tight, as if the house itself had become a single solid piece of stone. There was only one way out, and it was down. The tapping started at noon. Tap, 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 coming from beneath the floorboards. It led me back to the basement. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. The mirror was the only thing in the house that had light. I walked up to the glass. The figure was standing directly behind the reflection of me. It was so close that its long, spindly fingers were resting on the reflected version of my shoulders. In the mirror, I looked terrified. In the mirror, I was crying. I turned around, swinging my flashlight wildly. "What do you want?" I screamed. The real basement was empty. My flashlight cut through the dark, revealing nothing but dust, motes, and shadows. There was no one behind me, no tall man, no wool suit. I turned back to the mirror, and my blood turned to ice. The figure wasn't looking at my reflection anymore.
It was looking at me. Even without eyes, I felt its gaze boring into my soul. It raised a hand with too many joints, and pressed it against the inside of the glass. But it didn't stop at the glass. The surface of the mirror didn't clink. It didn't shatter. It rippled like the surface of a black pond. I watched, paralyzed, as the pale, elongated fingers pushed through the reflection. They emerged into my world, cold, gray, and smelling of ozone and wet earth. The figure wasn't a ghost in the mirror. The mirror was a window, and I was the one standing in the dark. It wasn't trying to get into my world. It was reaching out to
pull me into its own.
I tried to scream, but the air in the basement had become thick, like honey. I felt those cold fingers wrap around my throat. The grip wasn't violent, it was firm, inevitable. It started to pull. My face was pressed against the glass, and for a second, I felt the warmth of that 1974 sunlight on my skin. It felt wonderful. It felt like peace, and that was the most terrifying part of all. There was a sound like a heavy book closing. I stumbled backward, falling onto a hard, checkered floor. The air was warm. I could hear the hum of a refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawnmower outside. I looked up, gasping for breath. I was in the beautiful, clean basement from the reflection. The red tricycle was right there. I reached out to touch it, but my hand passed right through the metal as if it were made of smoke. I scrambled to the mirror. I pounded on the glass, but there was no sound. On the other side, I saw my basement, my real basement. It looked like a photograph left in the rain, desaturated, dusty, and utterly still. And then I saw him. A version of me was standing on the other side. He was holding my flashlight. He looked around the dark room, a confused smile spreading across his face. He looked at the mirror, wiped the dust away, and straightened his collar. He looked happy. He turned and walked up the stairs, closing the basement door behind him. I heard the lock click. I'm still here. I've been here for what feels like hours, or maybe years. The sun never sets in this basement. The tricycle never moves, and every time I blink, I see the shadow in the doorway getting closer. He didn't just take my world, he left me his hunger. If you find a mirror in your new home, don't clean it. Some things are hidden for a reason.